Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. Eden, brilliant to have you here today. And to kick off, please introduce yourself.
I'm Eden. I'm a secondary school student. I live in Plymouth and I go to DHSB. I'm school captain there, and I'm also involved in the local youth parliament. It's my second year being elected, and I focus on things like child poverty and social mobility and like the elevation through class systems. I think meritocracy of an individual is something I'm really passionate about. So, yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. And as you know, this is a special conversation for me actually because I went to the same school all those years ago. I don't think I was half as active as you are in various areas, though. Um, but we share an interest in social mobility and the importance of that in society. And it's been great working with you on the article that we're doing for the school magazine. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Uh,
Yes.
the way that we do it is we'll take the Values Jam cards. And to start with, how many piles would you like me to place in front of me? I'll divide up the deck.
Could I have three piles, please?
3 piles, okay. I'm going to make them different sizes, and then left pile, right pile, or middle pile.
Left, please.
Okay, so we've got 20 cards, so a number between 1 and 20.
17.
17, well, I'll go from the back if that's all right.
Okay.
Oh, well, look at this. Okay, so this is the card that you've chosen.
Excitement.
Excitement. So how do you feel about that? Don't say excited.
Excitement, I think. Well, my age is 17 right now, and I think right now we're starting to apply for university. So I and my peers are definitely feeling a lot of excitement for the future. I think there's a lot of ambiguity. We don't really know what there is to hold. Um, yeah, I think excitement is about like the unknown, and I think it's about the idea of being young and being inexperienced, at least for me, and not really knowing what to do, and having quite a large sort of pit of water to like jump into, and not really knowing where you're going to end up. But I'm excited for that, and I think all of my peers are as well.
Yeah, this is becoming a somewhat of a recurring theme. This comparison of the known and the unknown, and you just referenced it really well in terms of somebody at your stage. Uh, a lot of the future is unknown, and yet that can be exciting, or you can be fearful of it. But actually, the unknown is such a large percentage of everybody's lives that it's much better if you're excited about it because then you have the right kind of mindset towards it and it's more likely that good things are going to come out of it. And I just feel it'd be interesting to hear this from you because at your age, is it common for you and your peers to be kind of worried and concerned about the future, or do people really embrace it and are looking forward to what it reveals?
I think at a grammar school, there are quite high academic expectations. So if you don't achieve a certain standard or a certain result, you are naturally worried about your future because you're not sure if you're going to get into certain qualifications or certain universities or job applications. There's definitely an element of anxiety right now at school. I think there is with any school. Um, yeah, 100%. But I think at the same time it is excitement because of the new ways that you can specialize in the subject that you love and stuff like that. I think I think mostly it's excitement. There's definitely an underlying fear, but I think like you say, I think you have to use that adrenaline to your advantage and you have to look at it positively because if you go in and you go, I'm scared of this and I don't want to do this, then you're not going to be successful in that field. So definitely there is fear, but you have to harness the excitement, I think.
Yeah, there's an author called Susan David who's written a book called Emotional Agility. And when she's talking about the word courage, she emphasizes that courage is not an absence of fear. And what she says that courage is walking with fear, which I really love because it kind of doesn't try to pretend that fear doesn't exist. But what it says is that you can walk with it and embrace it and be aware of it, but it's not something, and this sounds like a contradiction, but it's not something to be afraid of. It's kind of natural and it's okay to be slightly fearful, but not for you to let it overcome you, I guess. Um, okay. And
Yeah, it's like for example, well, you were brainstorming like an idea for your project, stepping stones, and I talked about how like my parents always taught me that like the stepping stones, well, failure is a stepping stone to success. So even though those two things are antithesis of each other, even though an emotion or a feeling is completely different, it doesn't necessarily mean it's an obstacle to the final result. You can use those two things in harmony.
yeah, dead right. And you've just got to look at toddlers. I think they're a brilliant example, right? So a toddler starting to walk, when they fall over, they don't go, "Oh, I'm scared of that happening again, so I won't bother," right?
Yeah,
They just get on with it
yeah,
and try and try and try again. And I think
yeah.
that it's kind of a very simplistic metaphor, but I think it's so appropriate because if we just had that mindset to when we fail, we would be a whole lot better off, I think. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
let's get a bit more specific now with the next question then. And I'm going to kind of look to the other side of what we've started to talk about. When have you noticed a lack of excitement?
Hmm. A lack of excitement. I would say, I think because of my work with the youth parliament, I had to interview some young people for a documentary and talk about their experience due to the cost of living crisis. I think there's definitely a reluctance and a lack of excitement to venture into the future when people feel sort of already like it's been premeditated for them and they don't have any opportunity or any network or any way to be successful in what they love, and they're not excited because they feel like they're gonna follow their parents' cycle of generational poverty or what their parents have done or their failures because they feel it is a cycle. And I think there's definitely a reluctance and lack of excitement there with kids that maybe don't have the same opportunities as others.
Yeah, so the word that I've written down there is hope, and we all need hope, to have that sense of excitement. And if you feel that there is no hope, then it's really difficult to drum up any level of excitement, I guess.
Mm.
And it's funny that you mention working with the youth parliament because when I was thinking about somewhere where there is a lack of excitement, I just came to politics. And
Yeah.
it's just like, I don't know what it is, but you see politicians who seem to just lack life, many of them. It's everything is kind of drummed down, whether it's because they're scared of saying something out of turn, or whether it's because they've been in it too long and they've lost that sense of passion. Um, Maybe one of the few exceptions. I don't know if you've been watching the leader debates on television because the UK is coming up to a general election. But the difference between, for instance, the um, incumbent party and, for instance, the outlier Green Party is stark.
Mm.
Because whenever you hear anybody from the incumbent party, it it's really difficult for me anyway to lend any credibility to what's being said. And then the Green Party is like a breath of fresh air in that they're so kind of human and sensible and logical.
Mm.
What's your take on that?
Well, I agree with that. I also think that lack of hope is coming in with politics is coming from the public. I hear the phrase tossed around a few times, like the lesser of two evils would be to vote for Labour or to vote for a different party, because the policies are becoming too similar. I think I don't know what's kind of provoked this shift in attitude, but I think we as voters have lost hope and excitement for our future with our politicians. Even in a party where people would usually vote for, they've seemed to have given up.
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it? Because one of the things that kind of irritate, is that the right word? It's close enough. Is when people say, "Oh, I'm not going to bother
Yeah,
because my vote doesn't count." Well, yes, it does, and you can be damn sure that if you don't vote, then you can't call anybody out for the
yeah,
result, right?
yeah,
Um, and yet it should be such an important decision for everybody. And yet, like you say, I think many people feel that there is just a total disconnect between
yeah,
the people running the show and the people on the receiving end.
yeah.
I don't know whether we've spoken about this actually before, but there's an initiative that I'm involved in called Voices of Tomorrow. And what we're doing is inviting youth all around the world, so people under 25 years old, to submit their vision of the future through the creative arts. And how this came about was I was just researching the number of people in the world that are young. And three statistics really shocked me. One is that 25% of the 8 billion people on our planet are under 14 years old. So, obviously no vote and just receive what grown-ups or adults think they need. And so then I started to raise the age band and discovered that 50% of the world's population is under 30 compared to 1.6% of government leaders who are under 30. So
Wow.
it's hardly surprising that we're not happy, or young people are not happy with what they're getting from that
Yeah,
system. It's not representative.
yeah.
Were you aware of anything like those statistics?
Well, I study politics, so I have to talk about the number of minority ethnic groups in Parliament as opposed to the actual minority ethnic groups in public, and that lack of representation. I think it's an interesting point earlier about people sort of saying, "I'm not going to vote this year because there's no point; it's a waste of a vote." That's what's enhancing the two-party system, isn't it? That lack of choice. People may feel that the environment's the biggest issue, but they're not going to vote for the Greens because the Greens won't win.
Yeah,
Um, it's a complete, if we don't engage with our political system and we don't equally as contributors and voters have our part to play, then it's going to fail at our hands as well as our politicians. Sorry, I just need to put my computer on charge.
yeah, that's fine. And while you're doing that, a question comes to mind around you and your peers, actually. So I'm thinking, how do you make politics exciting for young people?
How do you make politics exciting for young people?
Yeah,
Hmm, it's a good question. I think, one second.
yeah,
Well, one thing that I think amongst my peers and people my age has been a lot of discourse about was, I don't know if you've heard about the national service system
yes,
that Rishi is thinking about introducing,
yeah,
and it's everyone's kind of in uproar because it's like, well, we can't even vote, and it's going to affect us next year. I think it's that feeling of of having no stake and no say in what's about to happen to you within the coming years. I think it's that feeling of they're creating policy right now and they say I'm too young to weigh in, but it's gonna directly impact me. Um, I think what we need to do to get young people excited is say to them what you say on this podium and what your essay is about and what you want to talk about with your teachers or your friends, that will have an impact. I'm not necessarily talking about votes at 16 and a direct political legislative impact, but I'm talking about some way to tell young people that their voice is equal to everybody else's, and that age shouldn't determine or squander your political stake, because else naturally we won't be interested and we won't want to have those conversations.
Yeah, that example that you've just given, it's beyond me how anybody could think that that might have landed well, because you're basically saying to a group of people that, like you say, don't have a say, this is what's going to happen to you. Now,
Yeah.
that's not how people like things to work, right?
No, it's
And
not democratic, is it,
no,
really?
it's not. It's absolutely not. And there's also, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I seem to remember there was recently a youth parliament that was disbanded or something. Are you
Oh,
aware of
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so it wasn't Youth Parliament that was disbanded. We're funded and endorsed by an organisation called the British Youth Council,
Okay.
and government funding hasn't been sufficient to keep British Youth Council running. So, for example, in November, I spoke at the House of Commons for poverty. Trips like that, it wasn't funded anymore because British Youth Council wasn't supporting us. And for a while, Youth Parliament, like it was up in arms whether that organisation could continue without that endorsement. But I think British Youth Agency has taken us on again.
Okay. Because the reason for that question of clarification was because I think it would be fascinating to have a youth mirror parliament or
Mm.
something along those lines.
Mm.
What do you think that sort of idea is at all practical?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would come with just enhancing the current youth parliament. The system is pretty much the same. You've got under 18s, you've got school students voting for teenage candidates. You record a speech and it's sent around to all secondary schools, and you elect an under 18 representative. I just don't know if we have a mirror parliament, what would be. I'm struggling to see like how those two things would collaborate, because if young people and under 18s don't have a vote and don't have a political stake, can't really make an impact legally, do you think the mirror parliament would just be used to gather opinion and have conversation with the young people?
Well, maybe to begin with, it would be different than what it could be ultimately. But so, like you say, maybe at the beginning it could be an advisory body of some kind that Parliament was required to respond to. So,
Mm,
at the beginning, it might not have any real power, but over time, I see that if they were putting forward suggestions that made sense, then people would start to trust in the value that's being created by that system, and perhaps it could be a way of giving youth a voice. And where that whole idea came from was this is quite a long time ago, but I was a visiting lecturer at a university, and the professor and I were going to go out for dinner that evening. And I remember us sitting in his car and hearing that, do you follow Formula One at all or not?
not really.
Oh, really? Okay. So there's a driver in Formula One called Max Verstappen. He's a multiple world champion now. And that evening in the car with the professor, we heard it announced that he had gained his first podium place, so finishing in the top three, when he was 16 years old. And that I remember saying to the professor, if only in society we would have enough or more trust in youth in the same way as in that sport. Nobody said you're only 16, so you're not able to be third in a Grand Prix. So why do we kind of put these barriers in front of youth in other parts of life?
Mm. Well, politically, I think politicians in election years, I think they're campaigning for people that are going to win them the seat. And it's fair enough. 17-year-olds aren't going to win them the seat because we can't contribute to the voting.
Yeah,
But simultaneously, you've got these like TikTok campaigns with, I don't know whether you've seen it, where parties are putting stuff on social media, notoriously used by teenagers, um, to kind of persuade them to, like, thinking it's funny or like having, having more of a favor towards one of a particular party. Um, so it's interesting, but I think it is just because we can't help them out really with our voting.
Yeah. How does that sort of thing land with your generation though? Because when I look at them, I think these are people pretending to be something that they're not for a group of people that they want to influence, and it just comes across as really badly done for me. But what do you think of it when you see like, older people who've never done anything like this before, trying to get involved in a space that is not really theirs?
I think it feels out of place, and I think it feels very disjointed. Personally, I don't really find it funny. I don't think I think there's a reason that it feels disjointed is because it's not of the generation. So when you try and kind of integrate into a humor that you we can tell you don't really understand, it does feel out of place. And I think that's just making the case for having younger politicians or more politicians of a certain ethnicity or a certain community, just people that can truly represent the proportions of the public and people that we can talk to and understand.
Yeah. All right, let's switch the conversation up a bit now, and we'll move away from politics. And I want to ask you about a time when you have experienced excitement.
Hmm. I'd say I think I'm just gonna I think, well, quite often I put myself up for candidacy, whether that's like school captain or youth parliament. I think the most exciting time is right before you find out and you sort of feel really exhilarated and really nervous. I think that's the best sort of. I really enjoy that feeling actually because it could all just be going, you know, it could all go wrong in a couple of seconds, or it could all go right. And I think I've really enjoyed that. I don't know why.
Are you able to share a specific example of that?
Yeah, I would just go back to youth parliament. We have an elections result night, and MPs turn up and councillors turn up, and everyone kind of knows you've done it. It'd be quite embarrassing if you don't get it. And all these people of power are kind of looking at you. Um, and yeah, it's just that anticipation in that final moment when the Lord Mayor has sort of stood on the podium, are like either going to read out your name or your mate's name, and you just have to see.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well because I've been fortunate enough to win a couple of like industry awards and stuff
Mm.
like that, and been at these flash dinners where the presentations are made. And the one that comes to mind most, actually, I was with my client and we had entered a 31 practices project for an award for the Business Psychology Association. And it was like the shortlist of three were read out, and then Tamsin's name was read out with her company name, and it was the photographer must have got her just as she kind of jumped up from the table with this kind of look of joy and astonishment at the same time on her face. And she was totally embarrassed by that photograph afterwards. But you're right that it's the double jeopardy type thing, isn't it? That you
Yeah.
can either be totally deflated or ecstatic, and it's one or the other, and you don't know what it's going to be.
Mm.
Um, the other one that comes to mind, and with ValuesJam, I encourage you, if something comes into your mind during this conversation, don't kind of push it away. Just please feel free to share it, even if it seems a bit random, like I'm about to do now. But when I was young, I used to love receiving post. I don't know what that's about. Just receiving something through the letterbox, crazy. Amazon's changed all that, right?
Oh, well, I don't relate, but it's nice.
All right, let's move on to a big question now then. So how could more excitement improve the world?
I just how couldn't it? I think I think the general, especially in Britain, I think don't you find British attitudes? I think we're sort of called cold-blooded around the world. I think we enjoy the complaining, and I think we enjoy the misery a little bit. Um, and I think that sort of seeps into our industries and our political system and the way that we socialize and things like that. I think I think excitement would change everything if we completely changed our attitudes. But I don't know how possible that would be.
Yeah, so I'm conscious that we've talked about youth very stereotypically to a certain extent, and now we're talking about Britain quite stereotypically. Um, but I think you're right. We are a nation that seems to be quite reserved compared to some other nations. So I remember we were visiting Rio de Janeiro, and we went out, the host who we were staying with took us to a bar, and there was a singer and a drummer and a guitarist on stage, just a small stage in this bar. And it was pretty early in the evening. It was about 8 o'clock, something like that. And I remember thinking that if this was in London, probably the people in the bar would be sitting there, maybe tapping their fingers on the table. That would be the extent of people joining in. Whereas there, and this like, 8 o'clock in the evening, people are up and dancing and having a wonderful time. And I think that the key thing for me about excitement is that it is contagious slash infectious. And even if what you stand for is not maybe a perfect argument, if you're excited about it and you demonstrate that and people can sense it, then they might well go with you actually. Because I don't know, there's something very attractive about excitement. And if it's exciting for you, then I'm sensing that.
Mm.
Have you experienced something like that?
Definitely, I think even in lessons, if your teacher's engaged or interested in the thing that they're talking about, then you feel excited. I think it's probably an important attribute to have with leaders to get a team sort of energized and ready. You don't want to be doing a task and the person that's telling you to do it isn't really bothered because then you don't feel bothered yourself. I think excitement is very community based, isn't it? It's very it's communication and it's about relationships between people. And like you say, it's contagious. Yeah.
Yeah, it also, I think it unleashes that discretionary effort that, might otherwise not be used. So when people are excited, they give more, and then, it stands to reason
Mm.
that they'll get a better result. And you've actually given me a memory from Devonport High. In my what's the first year there? How old are you?
Yes.
Well, you're year seven, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay, so year seven, I remember in my class of 31, I think it was, I came 28th in history. Now, the history teacher, his style of teaching was to walk around the room reading from a book and occasionally throwing the blackboard duster at people if he thought they weren't paying attention. So it sounds Dickensian, doesn't it? It wasn't quite that long ago. Um, So very poor result. Then the next year, I don't know what happened to that history teacher, but we got I think it was a guy covering for a year, and he had shoulder length hair, wore a leather jacket and leather boots, I think jeans. And I remember a lot of us say, "Hey, he's so cool," and it's like he was very enthusiastic about his subject, did some things that were pretty unconventional. And that year I came third. And
Oh
so
well.
it just goes to show that it's the same person, but it's a totally different level of input with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm and encouragement. And that's the kind of difference that it can make.
Yeah, and I suppose it must have meant that it was a more personal connection for you with that teacher as well.
Yeah.
For you to have moved up the ranks so much, it was that idea of something new and something that you could not relate to, but something that you could enjoy personally. I had an English teacher that used to um, play the ukulele during our lessons. And it was really random, but I actually really enjoyed it and I connected to it and I was excited to come to the lesson. So yeah, definitely, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And now in Values Jam, Eden, you've also got the chance to ask your own question. So I'll invite you to do that right now. So it's ask your own question, and that's to us about excitement, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
Okay. Why do you think that excitement is important?
Okay. And do you have the answer already, or do you want me to go first?
I'll let you take the floor first.
Okay. Well, I think it's not a cop out, but I think I touched on it just now. I think it is the key to discretionary effort, for one, um, and excitement. Why is it so important? I think the other thing is that it goes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning of the conversation, because I think it's a way for you to have a positive relationship with the unknown. And that is so important because the unknown represents maybe 95% plus of what is. And so if you have a positive relationship with 95%, that's so much better than having a positive relationship with just the known or just 5% of what is. So let me leave it as a combination of um, the establishing a positive relationship with the unknown and also releasing this discretionary effort.
Hmm.
What about you?
Well, I have another question if that's all right.
Yeah, go on.
Obviously, I've read your book, 31 Practices, and when you came into school, we talked a bit about you could find or you could decipher your values in what was what you considered a failure and what you considered a success, or what really got you down and what really made you happy. That would help you distinguish what your values were.
Yeah.
So a question for you is it's depending on the person, and there are methods to it to find your individual concepts and stuff. So where can we find excitement if we're struggling to see it in our lives?
Yeah, so like you say, excitement, I think, is another way of expressing a time when you feel really positive. And so if you're excited about something, it's likely that your values are being triggered. And so that's a way for you to identify those things that will fill you with joy. And so then, if you carry that forward to a time when perhaps you're not having such a good time, then it might be that you can identify things that you can do that excited you previously and mean that it can take you from a place that's not feeling so good into a better place. So, for instance, there's somebody I know, she lives in Anglesey, just off of Wales, and she's really strict about this that if the weather is good and she's at home, she goes out in nature. And irrespective of whether she's got work to do or whether she's got housework to do or anything else, she just cancels it and goes out in nature because she knows that that's really important to her. There's the answer to that question around how excitement can lead you to things that are important to you in a positive way, and thereby get you to be able to consider to do things that will make your life better than it might be at a given time when it's not so good.
Mm.
So now you've been very greedy there with two questions, and you do need to answer this question
Yes.
yourself.
Um, the first one, why is excitement important?
Yeah.
I think excitement is like when I'm deciding my degree and what I want to apply for, I think, would I be excited to write essays on this subject and go to lectures on this subject for 3 years? You know, I was considering doing maths for a little bit, and I thought, oh, I'm passionate about maths. I think it's a useful subject. I'm not sure if I'm excited about maths. So I think, you know, subjects that you'd be happy to do, and it's about working to live, isn't it? Not living to work. And it's about, if you're happy at your job, you never work a day in your life. It sounds cheesy, but it's those sorts of things. I think if you can identify the excitement in something that you're doing, then you know to keep on doing that. And if you can't, then you know to change.
Yeah, dead right. And we're kind of at almost opposite ends of career. And so it's not uncommon these days for people to say to me, so what's your plan for retirement? And I find that really weird question to answer because I think the whole concept of retirement is very different now than it was 20 years ago. It seems to me that retirement used to be what you did when you're not fit to do anything else. It's just like that. That's it. Whereas the work that I'm doing at the moment and the projects that I'm involved in pro bono, they are dead exciting, and I wouldn't want to be giving that up right now.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that it sounds a bit cheesy, but I also agree with you that it's absolutely true. Um, yeah. So, gosh, you right at the beginning of your career and wondering whether maths is exciting enough, and me at this stage of my career, just knowing that there's some stuff that I'm involved with that is dead exciting. Actually, one of them relates to maths, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I need to share it with you. So, it's an equation called the kindness equation. So, what I've done is broken kindness down into all of its component parts and then represented this in a symbolic equation. So I must send you that so that you can have a look and give me your view on it.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, isn't it, with maths? It's like maybe I take back that I'm not excited about it. It's interesting how you can apply it to things that don't seem mathematical, logical equations and stuff like that. It interlinks with, philosophy and ethics and stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in maths. At one level, it was because I was fortunate that I was able to do mental arithmetic pretty quickly. So I think, when you're good at something, it's easier to be excited about it, right? than when you're
Yeah.
not. So that was probably the beginning. Um, I also enjoyed maths in physics, for instance, where you could apply it to very practical situations and make an understanding of, why the ladder needed to be at this angle rather than that angle, and when it wouldn't work. So that was another thing I enjoyed about it. And now I really enjoy being able to apply. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a mathematician by any stretch, but I think that applying that kind of very logical approach to conceptual situations helps you think it through very thoroughly. Whereas sometimes concepts are left a little bit kind of vague, and maths helps you get under that and explore it in much more detail. So there's a few things that I get excited about maths for.
No, that's understandable. Yeah, I agree. I like how it can be definitive and it can help simplify rather than being ambiguous and subjective. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's more simple that way.
yeah. And I'm curious, you said you thought maybe you wouldn't be excited by maths. Then you've kind of now disagreed with yourself. But so where did you end up when you were thinking about what would be exciting?
I've sort of ended up in the politics journalism field, I think.
Okay.
But I think maths is involved in that. I'm excited to use maths in regards to that when talking about politics and when talking about applying logical equations and stuff. So I'm not going to negate it. Actually, I would like to take back what I said about maths not being exciting.
Okay. And good on you for journalism is a fascinating area, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that spectrum, um, I'm just trying to think of anything else that has such a broad spectrum of, I'm not sure whether it's style or what, but there is some really, really poor journalism. And at the same time, good journalism is just fantastic. There's nothing better than somebody who is like a dog with the bone for the truth and revealing that when some people perhaps don't want that to be done.
Mm.
And I remember watching something a few weeks ago, and I was thinking, if I'd had a different career, I would have liked to be an investigative journalist, embarrassing people that aren't doing things the right way.
Yeah.
What's the appeal to you there then in journalism?
Well, of course, I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in like subtle levels of maybe propaganda all across the world, and the idea that certain people and certain newspapers are spinning politics how they'd like the public to vote, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, like you say, good journalism and informed journalism is truth, and it's about getting fact to the people. And like you say, it's a large spectrum. It doesn't necessarily have to be writing papers, but I think just finding something out or doing anything could be classed as a form of journalism. We use journalism really in our everyday lives, even if we don't think it is. So yeah, I think it's vital.
Yeah. Have you watched any Louis Theroux
Yeah.
material?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts on his work?
I mean, I do enjoy it, I think. Yeah. No, I think I do. It's been a while, but I do. I think you just need to have a different take on things, don't you? And I think that's what captivates the audience and what gets people to read it and watch and whatsoever. So,
Hmm. So what about which journalists, or does it work like that, or is it just the subject that you watch? I'm just wondering whether there are any journalists that you admire or would say, that's the sort of journalism that I think we need more of.
um, it doesn't spring to mind now, but recently a new Lord Mayor was elected, and her father, she was born in Berlin, and her father was a journalist, and he was originally from Britain, and he wrote about the rise of the Nazis in the time of World War II, just when it was becoming quite an important issue. And she talks about the kind of people that he had to evade and the kind of lengths that he had to go to. And I think that's really important. That journalism isn't like gossip; it's important, and it's what's going on in your country and in your communities.
Hmm. And actually, I'm thinking, in the world we live in now, with us being so joined up and also the emergence of fake news and all of the rest of it, journalism is, I don't know, maybe more important at this time than it has ever been before because of the potential impact that it can have, which is far greater than ever before because of social media, the internet, our degree of connection.
Yeah, 100%. It changes, doesn't it, with like you say, the technological sort of wave. Um, you mentioned this in your book again, like the idea of like you can't necessarily sell things about yourself that aren't true anymore because people will be able to find out through the use of the internet or through the use of technology. So I think it is probably becoming even more brutally honest as we use technology.
Yeah, and since we wrote that book, I think things have changed a bit because at
Very
that
true.
time, well, I think at that time, the whole fake thing wasn't such a big deal.
Mm,
So the connection and the internet and social media was kind of moving to a place where, like you just said, the truth gets out fast. And so it's like you're on very dodgy ground if you try to present yourself as something that you're not. But now, of course, I don't think it's switched. And I'm an optimist by nature, and so I still believe that that will prevail. But now, somebody the other day was talking about how wouldn't it be amazing during the American general election if on the day that people were going to vote, something went viral saying that Joe Biden had actually lost it, and had become senile, for instance, and there was not enough time to correct what had been put out there. Now, that could have a devastating effect on an electoral situation. And I don't know whether that, whether that something like that could happen. I'm guessing it could, because people will believe that and won't believe the counter argument, no matter how some people won't believe the counter argument. And that wasn't in place, say, 10 years ago, I don't think, to the same extent that it is now. Um, so I think it is quite a different situation. Let me ask you a question around verification, because do do your friends and people that you know attach importance to verifying information, or is there kind of more of a willing consumption attitude towards stuff that's out there?
I say, unfortunately, it's willing consumption. I think we probably put too much trust in social media, without any means to, like you say, verify that specific information. Um, I think it's interesting what you say earlier with like the rise of, I think it's called a deep fake when you put someone's voice on somebody else's body or
Yeah,
something like that, or the use of artificial intelligence. I think that's really, really frightening because really, and my belief has always been that perception is reality, and it
me
doesn't
too.
necessarily matter the fact of what's happened. What matters is the impact and the implication and the result. So if technology can determine the result, then the initial event is it's useless.
Yeah, I agree. And then another example, recently I was chatting to a guy, and I was explaining how he is using ChatGPT a lot. And he said, I even use it on LinkedIn to reply to people messaging me. And I thought it was a bit weird. Um, but anyway, I looked at some of his responses, and it was clear to me that it was ChatGPT generated. I don't know, I can't really define why, but it was kind of too structured,
Mhm.
too cold, that kind of thing. And then I was speaking to a mutual acquaintance who had received a reply from this guy. And I just asked him, did he notice anything about the style of what he had received? And he said, "Why do you ask that?" So I said, "Well, just to share with you, apparently it's ChatGPT generated." And he said, "Oh, that explains it, because when I read it, I just felt there was something a bit creepy about it,
Yeah,
but I couldn't put my finger on it."
yeah.
So there's that kind of alarm bell as well, because again, like we were saying before, once people see that you're not authentic, then it's a long way back to gain credibility, because people, will put you in a box, not authentic, turn away. So yeah, it's a fascinating space there that we're at the moment.
Mm.
Now, I'm conscious of time. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm going to bring it to a close with the final question for our values jam, Eden. And it's always the same question, which is, what are you encouraged to do different about excitement as a result of our conversation?
Mm. I think I think it's definitely to take notice more of excitement. It's been really interesting to me the things that you've been saying about our politicians and how they've kind of lost it, and that's sort of reflecting on the public. Or you talking about your history teacher. I think what I've taken away from today is that excitement is contagious and excitement reflects on your community. And if you want people to complete a task, or you want to complete a task, you need to be able to see that same passion and invigoration and engagement in the people around you. So what I've taken from today is that it's community based and it impacts the people around you. And excitement isn't necessarily strictly individual. It's something that's important to encourage work ethic and to encourage growth in a larger group of people as well.
Okay. And if I was to ask you when you might have the first opportunity to put some of that takeaway into practice, when might that be?
I would say possibly I've got a meeting today for youth parliament, so I'm going to be putting that into practice. We're preparing to to write notes or just to start structuring an argument for a debate on whether democracy still exists. So I think the first time would be this afternoon at 5 o'clock.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, mine's going to be today as well, actually, and this is really helpful because I'm doing a write-up of a 31 practices review for a client. So basically, I've assessed feedback from people all over the world about the 31 practices project that they've been working on for the last year. And I now create a report with recommendations that I send to the client. And I'm going to consciously allow my excitement to come through in that document rather than it be kind of more toned down, which sometimes professional documentation is. And I'm thinking particularly around the recommendations because they're just going into a merger situation with another company. And the whole culture and values piece I believe, can be an extremely powerful foundation to help with the success of that merger compared to what they might be able to realize if they didn't have such a strong cultural foundation. So I'm going to allow the excitement come through for that. So thank you for raising that for me.
Definitely. Thank you very much for this conversation. It's taught me a lot.
All right, you take care. Bye now.
Bye.